James Carter was not a lucky man. Not that he was unlucky on purpose. It was just that things often did not go his way. Today was no different. He was flying his small cargo ship through space, carrying rare plants from Earth to a distant colony. It was his first solo delivery, and he wanted everything to go smoothly. The stars shone bright outside his window. The ship's instruments beeped softly. James smiled to himself. He was proud to be a pilot. Flying among the stars was a dream come true. But space was full of surprises, and James knew that well. Suddenly, his ship's warning light flashed. Asteroid field ahead, the computer said. James frowned. The usual route was blocked. He needed to find a way around. He looked at the map. There was an uncharted wormhole nearby. No one had ever used it for cargo flights, but it was marked as stable. Maybe I can take a shortcut, James thought. He pushed the controls and steered the ship toward the wormhole. The bright swirling light grew larger and larger. His heart beat faster. Flying through a wormhole was risky, but if it worked, he would save hours. As the ship entered the wormhole, everything outside turned into colors and streaks of light. The ship shook. James gripped the controls tightly. After a moment, the shaking stopped. He was through. But something was wrong. The ship's instruments blinked in confusion. The stars outside did not look familiar. James checked the map again. This place was not on any chart. Suddenly, the ship began to lose power. Alarms rang. The gravity stabilizers failed. James tried to fix the controls, but nothing worked. The ship was falling fast toward a strange, huge structure in space. He braced himself as the ship crashed against a glowing wall. Metal bent and groaned. Then everything went quiet. James opened his eyes. The air inside the ship still smelled like burnt circuits, but he was alive. Slowly, he unbuckled and stepped outside. Before him stood a palace unlike anything he had seen. It floated in space, shining with colors that shifted like a rainbow. The walls were smooth and curved. Strange plants grew in floating gardens around it. The air was filled with a soft hum, like music from the stars. James blinked. Suddenly, a crowd appeared. Colorful figures dressed in beautiful robes surrounded him. They smiled and cheered, throwing glowing petals that floated gently down, like snow. "Welcome, chosen groom," a voice called out. James looked around in confusion. "Chosen what?" he asked aloud. A tall, graceful alien stepped forward. Her skin was pale blue, and her eyes glowed softly. She wore a crown of silver leaves and a long white robe that shimmered like moonlight. She smiled warmly. "I am Princess Valari. We have awaited your arrival for many cycles. You are the groom." James shook his head. "I think you have the wrong person. I'm just a pilot. I don't know anything about weddings." The crowd laughed gently. "Modesty is a virtue among the Silurans," Valari said. "Please, come with us. The ceremony will begin soon." James had no choice. His ship was damaged and help was nowhere in sight. He followed the aliens inside the palace. The halls were wide and filled with soft light. Strange paintings moved like living memories on the walls. The air smelled of sweet flowers and spices. Valari led James to a room where a group of elders waited. They wore robes covered with glowing symbols. One of them, a wise old alien with deep green skin, nodded to James. "You are the one foretold by the Scroll of Unity," the elder said. "Your coming marks a new beginning for our peoples." James frowned. "I don't understand. I'm not from here. I don't know what you mean." Valari took his hand gently. "It is okay. You will learn. For now, rest. The celebration will begin at the eclipse." James sat down, feeling more confused than ever. How had a simple delivery turned into this? And why was he the groom? He looked out a window. The stars were bright. Somewhere out there, his home waited. But now, he was trapped in a strange world, part of a wedding he did not understand. As he closed his eyes, a small smile crossed his face. Maybe, just maybe, this adventure would be worth it. James woke up feeling strange. The soft light of the palace still glowed around him. The gentle hum of the floating gardens was like a lullaby. He rubbed his eyes and sat up slowly. Today was the day of the wedding ceremony, the moment he still did not understand. He looked around the room. The walls were decorated with patterns that seemed to move like waves. Outside the window, he could see the strange palace gardens floating in the air. The alien plants shimmered in colors he had never seen before. A soft knock came at the door. James stood up and opened it. Princess Valari smiled at him warmly. "Good morning, James," she said in a gentle voice. "Are you ready for today?" James scratched his head. "I guess I have no choice," he said with a nervous laugh. "But I still don't know why everyone thinks I'm the groom." Valari stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "It's because of the prophecy, James. The Silurans have waited for your arrival for many years." James frowned. "Prophecy? What kind of prophecy?" Valari sat beside him. "Long ago, our people received a message from your world, Earth. It spoke of a future when a human would come during the Unity eclipse. This person would be the bridge between our two worlds." James shook his head. "I don't remember any message like that. I'm just a cargo pilot. I didn't plan to be a bridge." Valari smiled softly. "Sometimes fate chooses us, even when we don't choose it ourselves." James looked out the window, thinking hard. He wanted to believe her, but it all sounded like a dream. Suddenly, a soft chime sounded outside the door. Valari stood and walked over. "They are ready for you now," she said. James took a deep breath and followed her through the palace halls. Everywhere he looked, there were aliens of many shapes and sizes. Some had feathers, others scales. All were dressed in bright, beautiful clothes. James felt like he had stepped into a storybook. They arrived at a large hall filled with floating lights and music that seemed to come from the air itself. At the far end stood a tall altar made of crystal and light. Valari turned to James. "The Silurans honor humility. When you speak, your words may be misunderstood because our language is different. Please try to be patient." James nodded. He had a small translator device, but it sometimes changed his words in strange ways. The ceremony began with music. Soft melodies floated around the room. James noticed the guests watching him with kind eyes, full of hope. When it was his turn to speak, he felt his voice shake. I am not sure why I am here. I am not the groom you expect," he said carefully. The translator hummed and translated his words, but the meaning changed slightly. Instead of sounding unsure, it came out as, "The humble groom accepts the honor with gratitude." The crowd smiled and clapped softly. Valari took his hand and led him forward. James felt like he was acting in a play, but he wanted to be honest. After the ceremony, he asked Valari quietly, "Can you explain more about your people and why this wedding is important?" Valari nodded. "The Silurans believe in a deep bond between souls. Our weddings are not just between two individuals, but between entire worlds. This union will bring peace and friendship to many species." James thought about Earth and its struggles with other planets. He wondered if this strange wedding could really help. Over the next hours, James learned about Siluran customs. They exchanged promises through thoughts instead of words. The gowns and robes were alive, changing colors with feelings. Guests shared stories from their homes, each more amazing than the last. At one point, a small creature with glowing wings flew up to James and whispered, "You must trust the path, human." James smiled at the creature. "I'm trying," he said softly. As the day passed, James found himself less afraid and more curious. Valari was kind and wise. She did not force him to believe anything but shared her hopes for the future. In a quiet moment, Valari asked James, "Do you feel anything different about this place? Like it is familiar?" James thought deeply. There was something in the air, a feeling he could not explain. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was something more. Just then, An elder approached them. He carried an ancient scroll, written in many languages. The elder said, "This scroll tells the story of the first meeting between our worlds." James took the scroll carefully. He saw words that looked like old Earth letters, mixed with alien symbols. He could not read it fully, but a feeling stirred inside him. Valari explained, "Our ancestors met long ago. They made a promise to unite when the stars aligned again." James looked at her. "So this wedding isn't just a tradition. It's a real chance for peace?" Valari smiled. "Yes, and you are the key." James felt the weight of the moment. He was just a simple pilot, but now he carried the hopes of two worlds. That night, James stood on a balcony overlooking the floating gardens. The stars twinkled above. The unity eclipse was about to begin. Valari joined him. "No matter what happens tomorrow, remember this. We choose to build a future together." James nodded. "I don't know what's coming next, but I want to try." Together they watched as the moon passed in front of the star, casting a silver light over the palace. A new chapter was beginning, and James was part of it, whether he wanted to be or not. The morning light filtered softly through the palace windows. James sat at a long table covered with curious objects, glowing crystals, strange tools, and the ancient scroll that the elder had given him the night before. The scroll was old and fragile, covered with symbols from many worlds. Some symbols looked like Earth's ancient Latin letters, but most were unknown to James. Valari stood nearby, watching him carefully. "The scroll tells the story of our ancestors," she said quietly. "It speaks of a time when humans and Silurians met long ago." James frowned, tracing a finger over the strange writing. "I never knew Earth had any connection to your people." "Before this," Valari nodded. "Most humans don't. The history was lost over many generations, but the prophecy remains." Suddenly, the elder who had given them the scroll entered the room. His deep green skin seemed to glow softly in the light. "The scroll contains a secret," he said. "A secret that only the true Groom can unlock." James looked up, surprised. "True Groom, what does that mean?" The elder smiled kindly. "The scroll is a key. When the right person touches it, the ancient message reveals itself fully." Valari stepped closer. "We do not know if you are that person, James, but you must try." James hesitated. He felt the weight of their hopes and fears. Slowly, he placed both hands on the scroll. A sudden warmth spread through his fingers. The glowing symbols began to shift and change. Images appeared in his mind. Distant stars, two ships meeting in space, humans and Silurians standing together, exchanging gifts and promises. He saw their ancestors talking, laughing, and making a vow. A promise of peace and friendship that would last forever. The promise included a ritual, the Unity Eclipse wedding, to unite the two species when the time was right. James pulled his hands away, breathing hard. This is real." Valari's eyes sparkled. "You have unlocked the message. It means you are the true Groom." James shook his head in disbelief. "But I don't feel special. I'm just a pilot who got lost." The elder spoke gently. "Sometimes the most ordinary person carries the greatest destiny." James looked at Valari. "What happens now?" Valari smiled softly. "Now we prepare for the ceremony. The Unity Eclipse will soon begin." James stood and followed her out of the room. The palace was alive with excitement. Aliens from many worlds gathered in colorful clothes, ready to witness the ancient ritual. As they walked, Valari explained more about the wedding. "The ceremony is not just a tradition," she said. "It is a living bond. During the vows, we connect our minds and hearts." James was nervous. He had never shared his thoughts so openly before, but he trusted Valari. Before the ceremony, Valari took James to a quiet garden. Floating flowers glowed softly in the air. She held out a small crystal. "This is a gift," she said. "It will help you share your feelings during the ceremony." James took the crystal, feeling its gentle warmth. He smiled at her. "Thank you. The moment arrived, the great hall filled with music and light. The unity eclipse began as the moon slowly passed in front of the star outside, casting a shimmering shadow. James and Valari stood at the altar, surrounded by friends and strangers alike. They held hands, their eyes meeting. The crowd was silent as the psychic vow exchange began. James focused on the crystal in his palm. Slowly, he felt his thoughts open like a window. Images of Earth, its green forests and blue oceans, filled Valari's mind. She saw his memories of childhood, of flying a small toy plane and of dreaming about the stars. In return, James saw visions of Siluran history, ancient cities built from light, peaceful meetings between many species, and a promise of unity. The connection was deep and beautiful. James realized that this ceremony was not just about marriage. It was about joining two worlds. When the vows ended, the crowd cheered softly. James looked at Valari and saw hope and kindness shining in her eyes. After the ceremony, the elder approached James with a small device. "This will help you communicate better with our people," he said. James nodded gratefully. "Thank you." Later, as the celebration continued, James and Valari walked among the guests. They shared stories and laughter, feeling more connected with each step. At one point, James stopped and looked at Valari seriously. "I still don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready to try. For Earth, for you, and for all of us." Valari smiled warmly. "Together, we will build a new path." As the unity eclipse faded and the first stars appeared, James felt a new sense of purpose. The accident that brought him here had become the start of something greater than he had ever imagined. The morning after the wedding celebration, the palace was quiet, but James felt a restless energy inside him. The joy of the ceremony had been powerful, but questions still crowded his mind. Valari found him on a balcony overlooking the floating gardens. The colors of the plants shifted softly in the morning light, and the sky above was a deep purple, dotted with stars. "James," she said softly, "the unity eclipse was just the beginning. Now comes the hard part." James looked at her, confused. "What hard part?" Valari's eyes grew serious. "The unity between our worlds is fragile. Not all agree with this bond." James frowned. "You mean there are people who don't want us to be together?" Valari nodded. "Yes, there are those who fear change. Some think that mixing our species will cause problems." James clenched his fists. "But if we don't try, how will things ever get better?" Just then, an urgent message arrived. A group of Siluran leaders gathered in the council chamber. James and Valari joined them quickly. The council was made up of elders, diplomats, and leaders from many planets. Their faces were serious. "The Terran-Siluran unity is being challenged," said one elder. "A faction from the outer colonies opposes the alliance. They believe it will weaken their power." James listened carefully. "What are they planning?" Another leader spoke. "They have begun a campaign of fear. They spread lies to turn people against the Union." James felt anger rise inside him. "This is the same fear that stops people everywhere. But we can't let it win." Valari touched his arm gently. "We must be careful. If the conflict grows, it could destroy everything we worked for." The council agreed to send James and Valari as ambassadors to the outer colonies. Their mission, to meet the people, answer their fears, and show the strength of unity. James felt the weight of the responsibility. He was still new to this world and its customs, but he understood what was at stake. The journey to the outer colonies was long and full of strange sights. James saw worlds made of ice, deserts of glowing sand, and cities built high in the clouds. At each stop, they met leaders and citizens. Some welcomed them with open hearts, curious about the new alliance. Others were cold and suspicious. James tried to speak openly, sharing stories of Earth and the hope for peace. Valari showed the power of their bond through her gentle words and calm presence. But at one city, the reception was harsh. The governor refused to meet them and sent guards to block their way. James clenched his fists. We can't give up. Valari nodded. No. Sometimes showing kindness is the greatest strength. They decided to hold a public meeting in the city square. The crowd was large and noisy, filled with doubts and fears. James stepped forward, his heart pounding. I know many of you are scared, he said. Change is hard, but our worlds are stronger when we stand together. He told them about the unity eclipse, the ceremony, and the ancient promise. He spoke about Earth's struggles and hopes. Slowly, some faces softened. People began to listen. Valari added, We are not trying to erase your cultures. We want to build a future where all can share and grow. A young woman in the crowd stepped forward. How do I know you won't lose your own people in this union? James looked at her kindly. We will always be who we are, but we will be stronger because we choose to trust each other. The meeting ended with cautious hope. James and Valari knew their work had just begun. As they left the city, James looked at Valari. This is harder than I thought. She smiled, gently. The strongest bonds are forged in challenge. We must keep going. On the way back to the palace, James thought about Earth and the future he wanted for it. Maybe this unexpected journey, this strange wedding, was not a mistake at all. It was a chance to build something new. A chance for humans and aliens alike to find hope and friendship among the stars. And James, the accidental groom, was ready to lead the way. The palace was alive again, but this time with a different energy. After their journey to the outer colonies, James and Valari had returned with a message of hope and a warning. The faction opposing the Union was growing stronger, but so was the belief in unity. James stood before the Grand Council once more. This time he was not just the accidental groom, but a leader. His voice was steady. We have faced fear and doubt, he said, but together we can choose a better path. The council nodded, some faces filled with renewed hope. Outside the palace, the people gathered in the great plaza. Aliens and humans alike came to see the man who had once crashed into an alien wedding by accident and now stood as a symbol of peace. Valari joined James on the stage. The Unity Eclipse marked the start of a new journey, she said. And that journey continues with every choice we make. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the ground. The crowd gasped as ships appeared in the sky. The opposing faction had launched an attack. James's heart raced. He turned to Valari. We must protect our people. Valari nodded. Together. The battle was fierce but brief. Using new alliances and shared technology, James and Valari's forces pushed back the attackers. After the battle, James spoke to the crowd. This fight is not just about power, he said. It is about fear of the unknown. But when we choose trust, we can overcome anything. The attack had shown the risks, but also the strength of their union. In the days that followed, James worked with leaders from many worlds. Together they created plans for education, trade, and cultural exchange. He visited Earth through a special portal. The sight of his home planet filled him with determination. On Earth, people were cautious but curious. James shared stories of the Silurans and the Unity Eclipse. Slowly, hope began to grow. One evening, Valari and James walked beneath Earth's stars. I never imagined this life, James said quietly. Valari smiled. Sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a mistake. James laughed. Yes, I crashed into a wedding and found a new family. Valari took his hand. And together, we will build a future where all can belong. As the stars shone brightly overhead, James felt a deep peace. The accident that had started it all was no longer a mistake. It was destiny.